everybody. So in this video, we are going to be going over paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting, all of which you're going to be including in all of your essays. So the difference is how you're including your evidence. So in all the essays we're writing this semester, you're going to have evidence that supports your overall topic or your overall argument. And of course, our first essay, you're going to have to use evidence to back up your reflection on plagiarism using the sources I've provided for you. So when you include evidence in an essay, there are three different ways to include it. It is either by paraphrasing that evidence, summarizing that evidence, or directly quoting it. So we're going to go over the different things you're keeping in mind when you're choosing which one of these is going to work best for your evidence, how to actually include it in there, write it out and cite it, and then making sure you got it on there and actually annotating with it. There is also going to be a practice that goes along with this, so make sure you're looking in the module for that practice after you've watched this video. So the first one is talking about why we would use any of it. So in your papers, why can't you just talk about it if you already know the topic? So part of using your evidence is that amping up of your rhetoric, your ethos, pathos, and logos. So if you haven't really talked in depth about ethos, pathos, and logos too much, we're going to go in that next week. But what it does is it strengthens that ethos. It strengthens your argument, and it ensures that your audience sees you as a professional and sees you as credible. So yes, you may know a lot about nursing already because you've taken a couple nursing courses, but you are not an official graduate within a nursing program. You don't have that degree to show your credibility within there, so taking your word for it doesn't make it credible. So we have to have the backup of evidence that makes it credible. It also is going to ensure that you're actually looking at all sides of the topic and actually truly making your argument and taking your stance based on credible research and not just on your own opinion, because we don't want to fall prey to logical fallacies. We want to make sure that we've supported our ideas with good, credible research. And that's why we include those paraphrases, quotes, or those summaries to back up what we're saying. So the first one, and the one you've probably used the most, is just directly quoting. So when you're reading this article or, excuse me, you're reading an article, you may be listening to a documentary, listening to a speech, whatever that piece of evidence is that you're reading or you're listening to, you decided that something the author has said matches one of your main ideas or supports your overall thesis or your focus question, or it could go into your counter, and you're wanting to highlight that and pull it out and use it. What you're saying when you're using a quote, though, is that you cannot say it any different way or any better. Okay, word for word, what that author has written or what that speaker has said, you're going to pull out that quote. You also want to make sure you're not using super lengthy quotes. If you've got a quote that's a paragraph long, don't use it. Okay, remember, your name's at the top of the paper, not somebody else's. So yes, you can use other people's information that you give credit to, but it still can't be your entire paper of somebody else's sources going through within there. So a quotation has to be identical to what you're actually hearing or seeing within that piece, which also means if it has page numbers, you have to give it that page number citation within there, and you're saying you can't say it any better. Be very careful of this. If you have read a quote and you decide that whatever the author said, they phrased it beautifully and you can't say it any better, what I see a lot of the time happen is that you actually don't know truly what they said, and that you think you know what the quote says, but you can't say it differently because you're not quite sure. So you put it in the paper and you kind of just hope it works. But 9 times out of 10, what the quote's saying doesn't totally match up to the main idea of your paragraph. So make sure, even if you want to use whatever the author has said as a direct quote, that you could still rephrase it in your own words to make sure you actually understand what it's saying. Okay? The one that I think you should be using the most in your writing is paraphrasing. So this is when you take a small section of the author's work, so either a sentence, a couple sentences, maybe a paragraph, you put it into your own words, and you also synthesize it with your idea. So you're taking, if they have stated the argument that, and these are made up statistics, student mental health because of state testing has student mental health issues have been on the rise because of state testing. They have seen an 80% increase. False facts. But and they said 80% increase, da-da-da. Well, if I wanted to use it word for word, I'm going to use 80% increase. But if I want to paraphrase it and I'm making the argument that state testing has to be canceled, then I might paraphrase and say, according to this article, with the high increase of mental health issues with students everywhere, and the sole reason being state testing, this ensures that state testing needs to cancel. So I didn't use what they said word for word. Okay, I didn't take their 80%, but I paraphrased, I said it in a new way, and I made sure that sentence included what I was saying along with it. Okay, so a paraphrase is the best way to go about it because it means you're taking your own ideas, your arguments, your main ideas, synthesizing and combining them with whatever that source has said. And then you're still going to give the citation, though, because you didn't know that mental health was on the rise because of state testing. You found that in your source. So a paraphrase still has to have the citation, just like a direct quote would. Okay, just because you've reworded it with yourself doesn't mean you're going to take it out. But you're still going to rephrase it to make it flow better with your paper. The benefit of a paraphrase is it makes it easier to read. You ensure that you understand it, and then it really drafts into your paragraphs in a lot more flowy fashion to make it more enjoyable to read within there. And then the last one is summarizing. So if you have an entire article, okay, that their overall idea is something you really want to take away, or you were watching a movie or a documentary or a podcast that you were listening to, and there's nothing specific you wanted to pull as a quote, but their overall message that you could sum up in like 2 to 4 sentences you could take away, that would be your evidence. And you could still use that as evidence as well. These also work really well if you're reading an article and you felt like what they said on pages 2, 4, and 6 really helped support you, but everything else was kind of it didn't really need it. It was just fluff. You could summarize what they said on those handful of pages that worked with your main idea of that as well. So you're taking the main idea of whatever they said, you're condensing it, just simply focusing on the main idea to summarize it, and again, explaining how it supports your main idea or your thesis within there in a short time frame. And again, you're still going to have to cite it. So so looking at these examples, you can see that your quote is usually going to be the shortest because you're just going to quote a sentence, maybe 2 sentences from your outside source. A paraphrase is going to be a little bit lengthier than a quote because you're including your own ideas with it. And then a summary is going to be even a bit more lengthier because you're summarizing a massive section of an article or an entire article instead of just a sentence or a paragraph within there. All your paraphrases and your summaries, though, not only do they have those citations, but you introduce them at the beginning. So if you look at the example summary and the example conclusion, I started both of those out with the name of the author. You could start it out with the name of the article as well. And then you go into that summary or that paraphrase and you end it with a citation. You have to start it introducing that you're going to go into a summary or a paraphrase and then end it with a citation. If I didn't start this out and then had this citation here, what it would come off as is that either I'm only giving the citation for the one sentence and not the entire piece, which is plagiarism, or maybe it comes off that I'm citing the entire paragraph, which is also a form of plagiarism because you put your name at the top of the paper, which means you're doing most of the writing, not other people within there. So make sure you're citing these correctly as you should. So to sum up, summaries, perfect for summarizing larger pieces, especially when there's a lot of different ideas and you're taking away those couple of main ideas together and combining it or synthesizing it with your own paper, your own thesis. Paraphrases work really, really well, and their ideal form, you should be using paraphrases the most because you're taking whatever sentence or couple sentences the author said, and then you're synthesizing with your own ideas and explaining how it supports and rephrasing it in a way that fits with your paper. And then last one is quotations, which you can still use. Okay, but what you're telling me is that you can't rephrase this in any other way. You have to use word for word what they said. Okay, and all of them have to have those APA citations within there. Okay, so your overall goal is I want you to, as you start doing your research, thinking about should you be using that evidence as a paraphrase, a summary, or a quotation, which is going to work best for you. If you do the legwork while you're actually doing the research, and start writing out your research as a paraphrase or summarizing the entire source out of the gate, then when you're actually writing your paper, it goes a lot quicker because you have those paraphrases done, you have the summaries done, you already have the quotes of the in-text citations on a note sheet. So now you're just plopping them in where you need to in your essay and you're all good to go. And it goes a much quicker pace within there. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions. Make sure once you've watched this video, then you take the time to practice paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. This is going to give me a chance to give you feedback in a low-key setting, not in your actual essays, on how you develop those paraphrases, summarizes, and quotes. Have a wonderful day, and email me if you have any questions.